From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. Is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget about the Junior. It's very important to remember the JR. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review if you are watching us on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And this is a chill week, man. It's a good week. Saints are on a bye week. They've won 2 straight games. They got a pulse. They got a little bit of a pulse. And honestly, it was times in that 7-game losing streak where you thought maybe they were left for dead. But nonetheless, here we are. Saints, 11 games in. It is hump day on this Wednesday in the city of New Orleans. And thank you for watching us on the Gulf Coast Sports Entertainment Network. So how are you feeling on this bye week here, Andre?
This is the calmest it has been all season. I mean, normally, we've got Monday stuff. We've got a lot of Tuesday stuff with the Pelicans, getting ready for a big Wednesday with the Saints. A lot of that we don't have this week because the Saints are off. They're enjoying some time with their family. We've got some time, not necessarily off, but just to spend a little more time with the family than we normally would. So it's a nice, chill week, Sean.
Yeah, I'm taking a couple of days off myself, so I'm looking forward to that. One of the good things about a particular late bye week, you can't always do this with every bye week, but with a late bye week, is it's a good chance to really self-scout, really take a look, dive into what has happened over the body of work that just passed. And when you have a later bye week, which is week 12, it's a good sample size to look at with 11 games. And this has been a rocky season for the most part. They've had some ups, a lot of downs, and then some ups again. So we want to kind of go through with the big picture, just sorting through, call it bye week awards, bye week notifications, bye week updates, where we think the Saints are currently at with their roster. And I just felt like it was a good time to just kind of assess things. I thought it was a good time on this hump day, this Wednesday, to kind of just sort through it. And we'll go kind of category by category with each player that fits the appropriate category that we bring up.
Oh, yeah. It is awards season on the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. We are handing out bye-week awards a little bit past the mid-season point of the NFL schedule. And we start with the big one, MVP. Through the first 11 games of the season, Sean, who has been your Saints MVP?
Oh, this is an easy one. I'm sure it's an easy one for you. And by the way, we have not shared our answers with each other. We wanted to do that just to see how we would go. And I don't even have an honorable mention for this one because I don't think anyone else even comes close. It is Alvin Kamara, number 41. One of his best seasons in years. AK has been outstanding. He leads the team in rushing yards, receptions by a wide margin. Has 55. Next closest is 32, Chris Olave. Receiving yards, total touchdowns. He's been a rock through a very tough season, through some very, very low moments. He's battled through injuries. And there were some, myself included, who were questioning if he still had it heading into year 8, 29 years old. I think he answered those questions. The answer is an emphatic yes, and I feel so much better about the extension now. Like, he's still got another year in him, like another good year in him. So I thought this was pretty easy. Unlike some other years where we've done this, I thought this was a pretty straight call. I'm going with Alvin Kamara, your 11-game MVP for the Saints.
Yeah, this was the one gimme that I assumed we would agree on because, the last 2 seasons for AK have been down to a degree, and you can attribute some of that to the play calling of former offensive coordinator Pete Carmichael. But this season, the explosive plays are back. He's having these long runs and these long catches. He's really been the backbone of this offense, and he's needed to be because we talked about it with Clint Kubiak. If you can't establish the run, it's just not going to work. And he's been forced to carry a lot heavier of a load than maybe he expected because of the injuries to Jamal Williams, because of the injury to Kendre Miller. And really, when you take a step back and you look at this Saints team, there is one player, in my opinion, who you could say on a league-wide scale has been elite at his position, and that's Alvin Kamara. That makes him MVP.
I think we agree. Team MVP, Alvin Kamara through 11 games. What we got next?
Up next is the biggest surprise of the season so far for you.
All right, yeah. And I'm going to do this on a positive direction, not a negative direction. Positive direction, I am going with, wait for it, Trevor Penning. Trevor Penning is my biggest surprise. He was the poster boy for small school bust first-round pick heading into this season, but here he is, still standing, and been an anchor on that right side. He's been reliable. He's been dependable. You don't see the massive whiffs that you used to see on the left side. You don't see the head spinning. You don't see the really heavy feet. I don't know, for whatever reason, it feels like he's gotten better with his footwork and his technique and how he's standing and how he anchors down. I think he's gotten better and better, starting to look like and he's not there yet, but he's starting to look like the player they envisioned when they drafted him in the first round back in the 2022 draft. I was not expecting this from him this season. I was expecting a potential. What I was expecting was, didn't expect that he's remained the starter, that sort of thing. It was going to be, we got to keep an eye on him. And honestly, that's faded really quickly this year. I mean, I think with all the other concerns up front, with the injuries to the offensive line and poor performance and that sort of thing, I think he's been a rock. He's been pretty consistent. He's been pretty steady. And I am a big believer in anyone in this business needs to be this way too, in my opinion. If you are going to criticize someone when they do bad, and we have done it, you have got to have the same energy and the same force when it's time to compliment that player when they do well. And look, and credit to him, because I'm sure there was some lonely days and nights with him, and he was a starter last year, got benched, wasn't even the tackle eligible, took the coaching, switched the position from left to right, something he had never really played. He's gotten better, so kudos to him. He is my biggest surprise.
And he was up there on the list for me for biggest surprise as well, but I wound up going Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Because if we sat here in these chairs at the beginning of the season and we talked about who was going to be the guy to stand out in the wide receiver room, we would have said a few months ago, they got Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Cedric Wilson Jr., Bub Means. They had A.T. Perry. They had Mason Tipton, the big training camp breakout star. And so far, the guy who has kept them afloat through this last 2-week winning streak of theirs has not been any of them. It's been Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who was nowhere on anybody's radar because he was not a Saint until a few weeks ago. Marquez Valdes-Scantling comes out of nowhere and is able to instantly be the X factor, the big play guy on this team. I mean, MVS kind of saved the day. He's able to.
He's been a savior.
He has. I mean, when Rashid Shaheed went down, that was the big question is, okay, well, who are you going to throw those deep passes to? Maybe Chris Olave. Chris Olave gets a concussion. We haven't seen him on the field since. Maybe Mason Tipton. Mason Tipton didn't even play last game, and he has not lived up to what they thought he would be in the training camp. So who on earth is going to be that deep ball guy that Derek Carr needs? Enter Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and he's also shown that run after the catch ability that we said was so important in this Clint Kubiak offense. So just for MVS coming out of nowhere, not being on anybody's radar, even when we talked about free agents, Sean, to strengthen the wide receiver room, none of us brought up MVS. So he's got to be my biggest
because
surprise.
He wasn't a free agent in the offseason.
Yeah, exactly.
So he was on Buffalo's season. He was on Buffalo's roster to start the season. So it's a good one. I might have him on my list a little bit later when we get to it. What's next?
Up next is the biggest disappointment of the season.
Well, I don't know if this is a fairly obvious one. It's Dennis Allen. I mean, it speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Like coming into the year 3, with the way the last season ended, you won 4 out of 5, but everyone had bad taste in their mouths with the apology to Atlanta. Still drives me like. The emphatic apology just gets me. He should have just watered it down. I'm sorry about that, but yeah, we just wanted to win. Anyway, started out the season, looked great. We're like, okay, DA's got something here. I thought they had a great training camp, a pretty good preseason, had some swagger to them, had some confidence about them, popping in the locker room. Sometimes you got to pop out and show them, to quote that Kendrick Lamar. And then things fell apart, and he wasn't strong enough to galvanize the team. I don't know if you say he lost the locker room, is that he lost enough people, couldn't keep the team together. And then when they lost to Carolina, he lost the opportunity to coach this team. I hate it for him because I genuinely like Dennis Allen. And I genuinely think he is a brilliant defensive mind in the NFL. But like I said a couple podcasts ago when we talked about the firing, Some people are more cut out to be Tony Soprano. Some people are more cut out to be Silvio Dante. He is a Silvio Dante, a first in command, a consigliere, not a first in command, a second in command, and then a consigliere underballs type as opposed to being the main guy. Frankly, the issues are bigger than him. We have addressed that. We have talked about that multiple times. But this team has responded with him gone the last 2 weeks. It's got to matter. That has to matter. So DA is my biggest disappointment. I have a couple other honorable mentions, if I can mention that. I'm going to go honorable mention number 1, Kendre Miller.
That was mine. Yep.
Okay. I'll let you explain why you have as your biggest disappointment. And honorable mention number 2. Is Isaiah Foskey still on this team? He was a second-round pick a season ago at a premier position. Is Isaiah Foskey even on this team? So those are my two biggest disappointments outside of the big one with Dennis Allen.
See, I almost put Dennis Allen too, but then I really thought about the expectations coming into this season, and the expectations were almost that he would be fired. I mean, Dennis Allen came into the year on arguably the hottest seat in the NFL, so actually doing that, I couldn't put him down. I went with Kendre Miller because when we talked about this Kubiak offense, and especially when things were up in the air and unsure about Alvin Kamara's availability, we looked at Kendre Miller and we said during his rookie year, he showed us the flashes against Chicago, against Atlanta, in the preseason against the Chargers, a quick catch against the Patriots. We've seen the flashes that Kendre Miller could have a little something at that running back position.
Yeah.
And you desperately needed running backs this season. I mean, Alvin Kamara was taking an absurd amount of touches earlier this year and still is taking a lot of touches. And Kendre Miller's the guy who you drafted to take some of that load off of AK's shoulders. Kendre Miller's the guy you drafted to kind of be the heir at that running back position once AK eventually fades out. And Kendre Miller hasn't been reliable. He hasn't been on the field, and it's even more disappointing because we've seen the flashes, even in the 30 snaps that he played. By the way, 30 offensive snaps that he's played this season. He showed a few flashes in those snaps, but 30 offensive snaps isn't enough. 10 games played out of your 28 total isn't enough. So I've got to go with Kendre Miller as the biggest disappointment.
2 things. Alvin Kamara has 25 more receptions than Kendre has snaps.
That's insane.
Here's the other thing. This offense is yearning for a second running back, and that's why Taysom's had to step up. It's such an opportunity for Kendre Miller that he is just not present to take advantage of. So, huge disappointment. He probably would be. We're on the same sort of page with that because I mean, it just. They want him on the field, and who knows, maybe he gets on the field. It's the second time on IR this year. It's like you get injured the first. You don't even do a full, actual live team drill in training camp. Disappointing, man. It really is. What's next?
I had an honorable mention for that one as well. And this one might be a little controversial. I said Paulson Adebo for my honorable mention because Adebo last season was one of, if not the best defenders. And it seems like this year he kind of took a step back. There were a lot of undisciplined moments. I don't want to say he lost them the game against the Falcons because there were a lot of things that could have gone differently in that Week 4 matchup. But that pass interference wound up being the reason that Younghoe Koo was able to kick the game-winning field goal and give you one of your worst losses of the season. Paulson Adebo had key penalties against Kansas City as well, and he had his interceptions, he had his moments, but in the offseason, we talked about Marshawn Lattimore, maybe not being on this team, and we talked about being okay with that because of the year Paulson Adebo had in 2023, and he didn't necessarily live up to that in 2024 before getting injured.
That's an interesting one. I probably would have had him on this list had it not been a bigger list of disappointments. Yeah. It's just kind of the way that season's gone. So, but I like it. Anyway, what's next?
Up next, we have our unsung hero. Put a cape on him for this season so far.
Yeah, this was a pretty obvious one for me. It's tight end Foster Moreau. I think he's quietly had a very good season. He's quietly had one of the best seasons of his career. I think he's been really rock solid in that locker room, rock solid on the field, from a production standpoint, from a blocking standpoint. I don't think we've talked enough about how solid he's been. 15 catches, 3 touchdowns. And to me, in the organization's darkest moment this year, the toughest moment when they get rid of their head coach, I don't think it's any coincidence that the player they sent out was Foster Moreau, the first person to comment publicly about one of the biggest moves this organization's ever made. They send out a tight end. I guess technically their backup tight end, and you understand why, because he's articulate and he understands how to verbalize and explain things in a way that's understandable, but also present the right message from the tone that's in the locker room and what they want to present to the public. And it's funny. I keep going back to the line he said in the darkest of dark moments. He said, I'm crazy enough to think if we lost 7 in a row, we could win 7 in a row. They've won 2 of the 7, or I guess how many? Was it 7 he's going to have total that he's going to be able to coach?
I think it was 8.
8, okay.
Yeah.
Foster was on to something there. So, look, I just think he's a guy that does a lot of the dirty work, especially in the run game. He had a couple of really nice catches this past game against Cleveland. I think he's such a team guy. I think he's a guy that's probably personifies the grit a little bit that you need. You need these type of players in every locker room. They're not going to make a lot of money. Makes a comfortable living. I think he's very aware of who he is as a football player, which is self-awareness is such a underrated quality just in life in general, but especially in the NFL where a lot of people think they're players they're not. I think Foster knows exactly who he is, and I think that has helped him throughout his career, and it's helped him here with the Saints. I think it's helped this organization right now weather some pretty ugly storms. So Foster Moreau is my unsung hero.
For my unsung hero, I'm going to go back to someone you talked about earlier, Trevor Penning.
Okay.
Trevor Penning, he was being billed as the problem on the offensive line all off season. I can't tell you how many times in lower thirds and supers that you see flash across the screen on Fox 8, I had to type Penning problem. Penning has not been the problem. If anything, he has been the one consistent piece on a unit that has been so astronomically injured this season. He has played 100% of the snaps in every single game this year, except for the one against Dallas where the Saints kind of pulled their starters early. He hasn't been perfect, but he's held his own. Trevor Penning has been a rock when next to him, Cesar Ruiz was out. At center, Eric McCoy was out. You bring Lucas Patrick in to play center. Lucas Patrick goes out. You have to bring in Connor McGovern from the Jets practice squad to start a few days later. Even Taliesin Fuaga has missed a few snaps here and there. Aliudo hasn't been what you planned him to be.
Exactly.
Shane Lemieux has gotten injured. So many people have been injured or they've underperformed. But Trevor Penning, the guy who was arguably the biggest problem that was being talked about on this entire offense, has been the rock for this Saints offensive line, and he deserves to be praised for it.
Yeah, and look, we were talking bust. We were talking bust with him. And look, a small school O-lineman that kind of surged late in the draft process because of a really good Senior Bowl, they've got bust potential. And it was going down that path. And like I said before, it takes not just physical improvement, but mental strength to deal with that. That's not easy at that position to deal with that stuff. All right, what do we have next?
Up next is probably the easiest one of the day, and that is Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement here. One was Taliesin Fuaga. That would be yours. Yeah, look, day one starter, been a rock on the left side of the line. He's been battled through some injuries, battled through some back issues. He's had to leave the game a couple times, but he's able to come back in the game. The game's not too big for him. And unlike Trevor, who needed that couple years to really help in his development because of where he came from. This guy was a starter, played a lot of snaps at Oregon State, and you could tell a little more polished player. And what's wild is Trevor had played all left, Fuaga had played all right, and then in the pros they've switched, and both guys have flourished in their new spots. So Taliesin Fuaga is the day, like I said, is the Rookie of the Year. My honorable mention is crazy because it really ain't got a whole lot of this rookie class. It's Matthew Hayball, the punter. I mean, it had been great, but he beat out an incumbent, and I think he's been pretty decent at punter. So Taliesin Fuaga is my Rookie of the Year. Yeah,
I got to roll with Fuaga as well. It was really between him and Kool-Aid for me, and Kool-Aid hasn't played enough to where Taliesin Fuaga has played the majority of this team's snaps so far this season, and it's been interesting, his switch from playing right tackle all throughout college to now playing left. When he was drafted, he said he expected it to be an easy swap. And then later on, he kind of admitted maybe it wasn't as easy as I thought. Yeah. But he's made it look easy at times. And he's gone against some pretty good defensive lines and some pretty good pass rushers. And overall, Fuaga's done a good job.
He has done a good job. If you see us doing this, we got a fly in here. It's driving us nuts.
I promise
it's driving us nuts
crazy.
in here. We're not just doing this just to throw some weird whatever hand signals at each other. It's a fly, just it's an annoying little gnat just in here. It's like, get out of here. Anyway, what's next?
Best free agent acquisition.
Okay, this is like this is we have a whole lot to pick from here. This is a very, very, very weak free agent class. I gotta, and this kind of highlights it. I gotta go with MVS. I mean, he's been here 3 weeks and he's already the best free agent pickup. I mean, averaging like 30+ yards per catch, big play machine. Got on the same page with Derek Carr, which is not easy to do. I've seen guys it's taken them years to get on the same page as the quarterback. This guy's done it in 3 weeks. He's been their savior in the passing game when you lose Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Very unique skill set in that he's a big and fast guy. You just wonder how he's been available because I know he's had some inconsistency throughout his career, but right now he's being consistent. And right now they are utilizing number 10, and I think it's kind of saved this offense and has brought the element back that they need. You need that over-the-top element in this play-action offense because you got to have those safeties back. If you don't have the safeties back, they're not going to ever the intertwining of the run and pass game and the play-action boot deep shot, it doesn't work. So Valdez-Scantling has been a savior in the passing game. Now, my honorable mentions were Chase Young, who I know some of y'all disappointed with, 3.5 sacks. I think he's played a little bit better the last couple of weeks. And then Lucas Patrick, I know he's been hurt, but at least he's been a starter. And that's kind of it in the free agents right now.
See, I put Will Harris. Will Harris was the one I thought of because it's been a long time, in my opinion, since this team has had a thumper in the secondary. Somebody to come down and make big hits. And we saw it last week against Atlanta. We saw it week 2 against the Cowboys. Will Harris, stepping in for Marcus May from last season, Jordan Howden from last season, there's really been no drop-off at that position. Now, Will Harris did miss a chunk of the season, a few games with an injury, so that's why I was kind of up in the air about Will Harris. But to me, he has kind of been one of the quiet performers on this defense and in this secondary when it comes to run support. When it comes to big hits in the secondary, I kind of lean Will Harris, and Chase Young was also, and Lucas Patrick were also my 2 honorable mentions. Chase Young, he hasn't been bad, but I don't know if he's lived up to what Saints fans hoped he'd be. He's probably been average overall. Lucas Patrick bringing his versatility to the offensive line that desperately needed him, but he's also missed a few games. So I went back and forth between a lot of names here, but I stuck on Will Harris.
That's a good one. I guess because when he was out those 4 weeks, you kind of lost track of him a little bit. He was the one that made that play initially in the 4th down stop against Cleveland. I mean, DeMario was quick to give him credit, so that's a good one. We kind of said that one of the disappointing guys in the free. I thought Cedric Wilson would have a bigger impact. He just has not had much of an impact at all, which is only highlights the fact that MVS to me is the best free agent pickup, despite only being here for 3 games. If you Chase Young still has game-wrecking ability, and it's frustrating because it's not there every play, game in and game out. But a guy that can touch greatness like that, I think you need that type of playmaking ability at that position. So right. I don't think he's been a total bust, but I went with MVS. I almost went with Chase Young there. What's next?
Up next is the worst free agent acquisition or the most disappointing free agent that the Saints picked up over the offseason.
I think I just said it.
Yeah.
Cedric Wilson. I thought he was a guy that could have been a playmaker in this offense. I thought he was going to be wide receiver 3. We saw that in training camp, but it felt like I know he got hurt, banged up and out of the lineup. For some reason, they preferred Mason Tipton, who is now out of the lineup. I guess I got to go Cedric Wilson there. I mean, it's been a pretty weak free agent class, but I'm going to go Cedric Wilson.
I had 2 names here. I just kept going flip-flop between them, Cedric Wilson and Ali Udoh. Both for the same reasons. Both of those positions were begging for depth. You've been decimated by injuries in both of those positions. It's been begging for somebody to step up and take the lead, and neither of those guys had. I mean, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed go down. A.T. Perry gets released. Mason Tipton has underperformed. Bub Means gets hurt. Cedric Wilson is supposed to be the face and the rock of the wide receiver room, and he hasn't been able to do that. And with Ali Udoh, I mean, You've had Lucas Patrick go down. You've had Cesar Ruiz go down. You've had Eric McCoy go down. Nick Saldiveri really hasn't been able to stick. Shane Lemieux went down. And one thing we talked about when they signed Aliudo was his versatility, and we really haven't seen it.
He hasn't really done much, and there's been multiple opportunities for him to step in and do stuff. We got a couple of minutes left here, about 2 minutes. We'll make these last two quick. What's the next one?
Their best win of the season.
All right, my best win is the most important win in my opinion. It's not the best in terms of the best that they played, but I got to go to Atlanta because, I mean, you talk about they had just made their first midseason coaching change since 1980. I mean, it felt really, 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 really down after that Carolina game. And Rizzy, you didn't know what you're going to get. You knew we were going to get energy and passion, and it felt like the players were responding. But if they lose that game and fall to 2-8, man, you're just in a horrible spot, and you probably get a lot of apathy towards the end of the season. Instead, they win somewhat in dramatic fashion, and they really needed everybody, all three phases. And then they've won since, obviously, to make it 4-7 and kind of stabilize things. So to me, that Atlanta win, to me, that was huge. The Atlanta win was the best win of the season.
I went with Dallas because it vaulted the Saints into being national darlings. It was total domination over a team that was supposed to be good. Atlanta, it was a tight game. You could argue the Saints were outplayed, but Dallas, to me, was the win that vaulted the Saints into the status that they were supposed to be. Last one we got, their worst loss of the season.
I mean, I think we can both know about this. I mean, the one loss that gets everybody, they got the new decisions had to be made. That was Carolina a couple of weeks ago. They had absolutely no business losing that game. Carolina had absolutely no confidence, and now they have a little bit of confidence. The Saints should have beaten Carolina. By no means should they have lost to the Panthers, and that's why Dennis Allen is not here, and Darren Rizzi is easily the worst loss Carolina.
See, I went with Philly. I think Carolina was almost a blessing in disguise because you were able to reinvigorate your season with the firing of Dennis Allen and the hiring of Darren Rizzi. I went with Philadelphia because of what came next. Because it was the start to that 7-game skid, because of the injuries that happened, and because that was such a winnable game that you lose at the very end. And it's a game the Saints should have had that was the beginning of the end for the team.
So you picked the start of the losing streak. I picked the end of the losing streak. And that's how we're going to end this podcast. For Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.